Welcome to T-Minus Attending, and I'm your host, Dr. Shashir Shah. I'm a wound care specialist, entrepreneur, private equity operating partner, proud father, and educator. Our goal at T-Minus Attending is to empower new and experienced medical professionals to lead better and live better so they can fulfill their personal professional lives as they grow into their careers. Well, this is our 5th episode, and I'm honored to introduce nationally renowned and our very own local guest here in Phoenix, Arizona, Dr. John Shufeldt. He's an emergency physician, entrepreneur, multi-engine commercial licensed pilot, attorney, 11-time author, former founder of NextCare and MeMD, and recently the managing director of Accelerant Ventures. He also hosts his own podcast titled Entrepreneur RX, which is also the title of one of his books on guiding physicians who want to take a leap into medical, biomedical businesses, and much, much more. I can talk about all his accomplishments, and it would take the entire podcast. I want to invite our listeners to follow him on LinkedIn or any social media. And I'm hoping we'll walk away learning about failing and leading fearlessly. That's really what we're about here at T-Minus Attending. So, John, welcome, and I appreciate you joining us today.
Thanks. Honored to be here. And this is a phenomenal subject and podcast. So let's dive in.
Absolutely. Well, I did a little cheating, and obviously I've been learning about you and following you in the sidelines, but we met for the first time today. So thank you again. And I love that you always say you're living in the state of perpetual beta. It's I think a phrase you've coined. And you say every mistake and failure you've had has put you in a better position. As you'd say, if no one is dying, how bad can it be? So from getting fired in NextCare and starting MeMD, our audience can learn a lot from your failures and successes. So maybe tell us a little bit more about, maybe going back in time. What were your thoughts after residency, and did you have a master plan, and how did it bring you to where you are today?
I thought I'd be an academician my whole life. I trained at Christ, south side of Chicago, Knife and Gun Club. Loved my training, loved the people there, and planned on staying there. And then at the time I was working 2 jobs, at Edward Hospital in Naperville as an EM attending, and then at Christ as a teaching attending. And then after 30 years, the weather in Chicago, I just thought, time to do something else. So we picked up and moved out to Phoenix, Arizona. And I was looking for different work opportunities, and I ended up taking a job as an emergency department medical director at a little hospital between Tucson and Phoenix. And then ultimately ended up taking over the contract and becoming their chief medical officer over the span of the 10 years I was there, and then picked up another 3 or 4 emergency department contracts and lumped those up and sold them after about 10 years.
That's summarizing a long 30, 40-year journey in about 1 second. So I'm sure there's a lot of color in between, and we'll talk about some of that now, but you're very humble about saying that for sure. I didn't realize we had a connection. I went to DO school. I'm an osteopathic physician, and I actually rotated at Christ Hospital about 3 months, neurology, ED. So when I don't think you were working with me or you were my attending, but I remember your name on the list back, I think it was 1990. I can't remember the date, now I'm dating ourselves, but I believe you were an attending at that time. Is that right?
I was. So I stayed there 89 and 90, and then I come back occasionally. But, I still have friends there. My sister still works at the Edward Hospital in Naperville, so I find reason to come back. But it's, I still love that program and the people there.
Well, lived in Naperville, Downers Grove, commuted to Christ, UIC, many of the hospitals, and same as you, came out here in Phoenix for the sun and fun. So I'm glad we have some connection points there. By default, you're a leader. I mean, you're growing ED programs, you're getting contracts, kind of like people flipping homes here in Arizona. You're flipping ER projects, and you have many executive positions. Maybe tell us a little bit more about how you view leadership in all the things you've been through, the hoops and hurdles, the failures, the successes, and maybe give us a little color on that.
Well, here's what I think. Here's the short answer. I tend to a little bit fall into these roles, and I'm one of probably maybe a little old school where I think if you're the leader of the organization, you're in the office first, out of the office last. It's the leaders eat last sort of Simon Sinek perspective, because I really think that if you're leading from the front and you're setting the bar where you want to set it, then other people will say, well, gosh, I mean, that woman or that man is out there doing it. I guess I could be too. And, I always like to think that you give all the credit and take all the blame. And so I've tried to, over the 34 years of being in emergency medicine and medical leadership, I've tried to live in that ethos. The hard part about it is that, and God knows I am no gold standard. I'm far from one of the Mayo brothers. But, if you're in that role, you have to set the example. So if you're screwing up or screwing around or blowing off shifts or treating people poorly, and when you counsel someone else, they say, well, are you kidding me? Look at the way you treated that, whatever. Or look at you did the same thing. So it's one of those roles where there's, I do it all again in a second. There's a lot of excitement and fun, exhilaration that comes from it, but there's a heavy price to pay. So it's an old saying from, who much has been given, much is expected. And so I think if you want to be in that role, you have to have that construct, or you'll shoot yourself in the foot.
Yeah, for sure. I like the way you said you have to, take all the blame and give all the respect or the credit. I think all good leaders do that. You watch the back of your coworkers and those above and below you, and they have to feel protected. They have to feel you have to watch their back. Things go right. You can't take all the credit because it takes a team to get you there too. So I appreciate you sharing that, because I don't think I stressed that enough during our conversations and our other sessions here. Leading by example and showing what you're doing, and then other people say, hey, you raised the bar. Here's what we should meet. And I think one of the things you say in one of your books is that we only meet 30 to 40% of our potential intellectually, physically, mentally. I'd say you're right, because if you're going to 50%, 60%, people are 20%, there's a big gap that they got to fill. I love the way you say that. Maybe you can give an example of how to do that and how to reach that.
I think if you come from this construct of there's always more gas in the tank. Yeah. And, I worked 2 days ago in one of the reservations and then jumped in the plane and flew to another reservation, worked the night shift. And I'm not a fan of working 24-hour shifts or a fan of flying after working a 12-hour shift either, but it had to be done. Someone had to do it, and it just ultimately had to be me. And so if you have that construct where, if something bad happens, it is my fault, because I hired the person who may have done something that was below the standard of care, but at the end of the day, I hired them. And maybe I didn't lead or coach or encourage them properly or enough. But at the end of the day, the buck always stops with me. Now, if they do something great, I'm the first one to cheer them on and give them all the credit, because they're there in the trenches. So we have about 500 nurses and doctors working all over the country now in this business called tribal health, and we staff about 50 different tribal facilities in various capacities around the country. And I always say I'm the doctor of last resort, because if no one else can fill the shift, I tend to try to do that. And we have a chief medical officer who is a true saint and a phenomenal physician. He has the same construct. He's there working right now for the same thing, because we're just short staff. So it's, kind of every person joins the fight. For sure. You mentioned this lightly, but you said you had to fly back from one place to another. Are you flying that yourself, or are you taking commercial? No. So the reason why it's easy for me is I fly myself. And so around Arizona, I'd fly the helicopter to get to sites, and around the country, I'd fly out of a twin-engine plane. And so it's easy for me to fly from south to, get off shift at 6 p.m., fly here and start working at 8 p.m., same time zone. So it actually works out pretty easy. I admire your energy. I need 2 cups of coffee before I get started. It looks like you're on adrenaline all day. So that's no. It's just, I do think people operate at the lower potential of their threshold. You hear about, using the Navy SEALs, you hear about some feats they do, or people who have done ultra endurance things, or people who grind it out in the clothes to get a contract completed. I always feel like, I'm operating in probably my 20 to 30% bandwidth, and I think there's always more gas in the tank. Oh, well, you got to step it up then, John. You're slacking. That's flying in itself is a democratic thing. Being a physician, doing all the things you accomplished, and, the way you kind of lead things. One of the things I do, I hire our physicians, mid-levels. We work with many providers. I run programs in Texas, overlook 10 clinics myself, and we hire individuals, and we do what we call a predictive index of what their personality is like and what kind of people they will be working with and feel comfortable with. And I would think it takes a certain level of fearlessness, courage to do that. I know it seems like you lead like a maverick. You think outside the box. Do you think it takes those qualities to be a good leader, or can you be one if you have someone of a different kind of nature, personality? No, in fact, I think what you just described are the leaders that are often the worst leaders. They're the cowboys or cowgirls who are shooting from the sea, shooting from the hip, and there are times to do that clearly in emergency medicine and in business. But I think that the best leaders, and I think that Peter Drucker's proved this out, are the quiet introverts, great communicators, great listeners, engaging people, I think those people make the best leaders. And there's the jobs and the musts, and there's that genre of leaders, and they do phenomenally well, obviously. But I think the quiet, unassuming leaders who show up day after day, lead from the front, are great communicators and listeners, are empathic, or empathetic at least. I think they're the ones who win the day on the long-term basis.
I'm really glad you mentioned. I've read Drucker and I have lots of books and literature on introverts. By nature, many of our colleagues who went to medicine, maybe having good dialogues with patients, they tend to be quiet, a little more introverted, and maybe the feel in the industry as well. Maybe I'm not suitable for leadership because I'm not outspoken. I'm not, the head of the group and head of the fun in the party. But I think if you're the last person speaking in a group and you're thinking and digesting everything around you, which we often tend to do because we're thinkers and learners, but we often have great things to say, and it doesn't have to be the loudest voice in the room. Often can be the most respected voice in the room. So I like that you're encouraging our audience about that, because I think there is a misnomer about what we think makes a good leader, and it's not necessarily a loud leader.
I think it comes down to desire and what you want to do in your life. Mm-hmm. I always say I'm unhireable because I've done this so long now that I'm not sure I could work in a large organization. The nice part about being a leader is you're generally unfireable as well, unless you fire yourself. But I do think there's a certain realization that you get, and you get it a little bit later when you're like, holy cow, this is a lot of work. And if that's okay, then go for it. But there's a lot of people who have, it's just, I was listening to Reid Hoffman talk about balanced lifestyle, and it says any entrepreneur says they want to have a balanced lifestyle. We basically say we're not going to invest in you. This isn't for us, because it's literally, I think, impossible, not an N of one, but impossible to have a real balanced lifestyle if you're trying to lead an organization while growing. Because again, it all rides, it's not a team effort, but you're, at the end of the day, you're responsible for everybody. And it's hard to be balanced in that respect.
Yeah, John, you mentioned a good thing. We hear everywhere, any article you read in newspapers, social media, work-life balance. And there's a saying in Asia, and I can't quote, I don't think it's one individual that said it, but the belief there, at least, is no work, no life. And, you have to look in yourself what you really want in life, what you're composed of, and what you're looking to gain. Because you're right, if you want to be sort of an entrepreneur, physician, or, head of an organization that everything relies on you, you have to be really ready to give up something. And the work-life balance often gets a little bit muddled. So you're right. Often you have to make compromises, but sometimes the light at the end of the tunnel is worth all the sacrifices, and you have to be willing to do that, just like becoming a doctor.
Yeah, and that's why I think physicians in general are phenomenally well set up to be entrepreneurs, because we're used to sacrifice, and we're used to the long game, and we're used to using our intellectual and physical stamina to accomplish our goals, and that's entrepreneurism. The question is, do you want to shift a little bit and do it in another field? Now, physicians used to be always labeled as poor business people. And there was a reason for that, because kind of we were. Because a lot of us said, well, how hard is medical school? I mean, medical school is so difficult. Anything else pales in comparison. It may be true, but it's a whole nother field of learning. So I've found, just trying to go back to school, that there's a lot of stuff I don't know. And it seems to be expanding, like the universe of stuff I don't know. And so, trying to find good people and surround yourself with them and listen to their reasoned advice, it makes it a lot easier. So although I think I may be the leader, I'm really not. I mean, it's an inverted pyramid where my roles, I would say my role is to support the people caring for the people. And occasionally I'm the people caring for the people, but my role is really to support the rest of the team and do whatever I can to make their lives easier, their work-life balance better.
Yeah, I love that approach. In fact, I often, I work with residents and students. I say the half-life of what you know is about 6 years.
Yeah.
Someone else definitely knows more than you do. And the younger generation has just absorbed a lot quicker than we can adapt and change. And so we're just trying to drink out of a fire hydrant as we get older. But you got to keep learning. I think good leaders are lifelong learners, as you've suggested. Can you share with us what you're currently pursuing now? You obviously, got multiple degrees, learning on your own and all that good stuff. But what are you doing right now to learn and stay active?
I've done kind of formal schooling. I try to go back every 10 years or so. And I just finished 2 programs in the last couple of years. But right now, we have this venture capital fund, and we invest in health tech, med tech startups,
Okay.
Often physician led or healthcare professional led. And so right now, I concentrate my learning on what they're putting forth for us to invest in. So it's allowed me to try to get a really deep look at some really cool things. And I hate to even use the buzzword AI because everyone and their uncle says they also have AI.
For sure.
But I try to go deep into that. I also try to go deep into CRISPR and in gene editing. After reading the book about Jennifer Doudna, I'm in. And that, I believe, is, the harbinger of the future of medicine, where healthcare has to go. And so those things really excite me.
Yeah, I often think some of the diseases and even specialties that many folks are going into now may be obsolete or maybe completely different 5-10 years from now, where before we really are thinkers and we have a lot of knowledge. That knowledge is being replaced by automation, whatever you want to call it, machine learning, AI. And our physical skills are also sort of at risk because there's robotic surgery. And there's that intersection between that the human brain is certainly capable of doing a lot of things. And you have to find that intersection and evolve and learn and see what's out there. And I'm glad you mentioned that because you're involved in new technologies and finding where the evolution of our field is really going. And many things we don't even know, but the future is right in front of us for sure.
Yeah, I had for a number of years, I had a teleradiology business, and we would read films from urgent cares across the country. And I was doing my research on an Israeli film that was reading plain films for $1 a film. This was probably 2015. They were way early. And I thought, okay, I see where this is going. So I ended up selling the teleradiology film. Now, it didn't accelerate as fast as I thought it was going to, but the fact is it's here. And it's just a matter of time before much digital imaging is at least read by an AI-driven process first, and then a radiologist signs off on it. So I knew the price was going to come down. And, if I tell people, if you're an interventional radiologist, probably a phenomenal specialty, I would do that in a second. If you're a plain film radiologist, if you're but if you're reading images, that's great, but you may have a short half-life.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that. I say that to a lot of my residents, be careful about the specialty you choose for. Have you done the research? And, the other thing I also stress, and maybe you can support this as well because of your business background, is, most physician clinicians don't read financial books, Wall Street Journal. And I'll tell you, I learn a lot from business journals, magazines about healthcare, because if it's profitable, if it's got a market capability, if it's got a total addressable market, a TAM, it's probably got a lot of potential, and that's going to hit the headlines well before JAMA or New England will. And you've got to be ahead of the curve. And usually the people on Wall Street are listening to these things as well, whether they're bankers, private equity, so forth. And then you can really merge the two things and learn a lot and be ahead of it. Any comment on that approach? Do you kind of approach things that way at all?
I do. And, just to digress a little bit, one thing I've seen over the years is that there's a lot of physicians my age who have to work because they have not saved up during their lifetime to be able to have a meaningful retirement. So I would caution residents and medical students, the second you start getting a paycheck, I realize you have student loans and things you have to do, but stay well below your means and really put money away every paycheck for the future. Because, I've had a number of friends who can't practice emergency medicine anymore, and their disability policy was okay, but it doesn't cover their expenses. And they're kind of doing that's now what do I do? My whole life is spent doing this, and now this doesn't exist anymore. And so get people calling me, not daily, but close, and saying, hey, can I have an advance on my paycheck? And they're living hand to mouth, and they're making not a small amount of money a year. Yeah. And so really, the time to start doing this is early, not when you're 50.
Yeah, for sure. Time is money. Compounding interest is your friend. It's the eighth wonder of the world. Yeah. And, there's a lot of resources out there like White Coat Investor and many, many books, things you've spoken about as well. So thank you for mentioning that, because I think if you're not financially secure, you can't really do all the other great things in life you want to do. And one of the things that I talk about is no money, no mission, or no margin, no mission. Totally. If you're altruistic and you want to help people, you need to, whether it's in your business, in your practice, in your personal life, you need that cushion to then be able to do good things or charitable work or donate money, because it takes that to drive anything you want to really do. And so as much as the M word is a bad word in healthcare, and when you're a doctor, because you want to just save the world, you have to realize that those two equate to each other somehow, some way. And you got to put the oxygen on yourself, just like in an airplane, before you take care of your child next to you. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Totally. Another thing I've seen is that many of us, I always call them, when I was an RA in college, I started using the term fragile perfects. And I think that term has been used by others far smarter than me. I find these people in my room in about October, and they were usually freshmen or sophomores, and they are getting a D in a class, or they gained 20 pounds, or started smoking, or some minor trauma in their life. They totally decompensated. But I realized, too, that a lot of these kids, and I've seen it in adults as well, their whole life has been one success after another. And so they never had the opportunity to build up their resilience muscle. And so I always told our kids, look, I want you to fail.
Yep.
I will be here standing by your side, but I'm going to let you fail. I mean, I'm not going to let you hurt yourself, but if you fail, that's okay, because you'll realize that failure is often a blessing. And I can say with confidence that every time I failed, and I've had some spectacular fails, that if you have the right construct and say, all right, what did I learn? What could I do better? Game on. Every time something better has come down the line, which I said, oh my God, thank God I failed, because had I not failed, next thing would not have happened. But a lot of us, I think, grow up in this bubble that we've been perfect. We get straight A's, we crush the MCATs, we do well in medical school, we're chief residents and all these things. And all of a sudden you get a little bump in the road and you're like, I don't know how to handle this. I think I was really fortunate because I grew up kind of sucking. I mean, I grew up failing. And I just learned how to be scrappy and just say, I'll get better next time. And so I didn't have this voice in my head saying I'm an idiot and stupid, all the things that are probably true. But the voice in my head never really got activated. It was just like, pick yourself up. It's fall down 7, get up 8, just press on. And so that actually helped me, even though it was kind of a pain in the ass at the time. It actually helped me. So I do want to challenge people to, failure is not all that bad. Now, if I die in a plane crash on my way down, I was this one might have been bad. But today, I've had 2 plane crashes. This one today, so far so good.
Yeah, well, I think failure is key. And, one of the episodes I'll be talking about in the future and you're leading up to is imposter syndrome, where, we don't think we're either good enough or striving to be better, or we lead a life of perfection, because that's how it is. And even when we treat patients, if you're not perfect in many cases, they could die, especially if you're doing critical surgery or if you're, having an MI or doing intervention. And you have to wake up with gratitude, right? Knowing what you have is really good. And then allowing yourself to fail, because sometimes closing that door, that bridge burning, actually allows you to take a different path. You may not look that way at the time. I think you have many good examples of that yourself with NextCare and so forth, that if you didn't have that failure, you wouldn't have had other greater successes.
And, just to be super candid, everyone has imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone. And if you don't have some level of imposter syndrome, your arrogance will probably catch up to you at some point. And so we all fake it. And I walk into patients' rooms who are super complex, or there are multiple traumas. I'm, back when I'm there, oh crap, this is going to be a challenge. Yeah. But I've got to fake it and say, we've got this. And, you project that confidence to the patient and their family, and then you walk them through it and you do it collectively. But we all have imposter syndrome. Yeah,
for sure. You got to show that confidence in the room, and then you can go out and look something up, or call a friend, or call a colleague and say, hey, what do I do with this? That's a benefit of our community. That's why we have consultants. But in there, you got to save face.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that. You touched base on something I was going to ask you. Obviously, a lot of physicians are still working, grinding it out, talk about living below your means. You obviously have the luxury of working because you enjoy it, and you do a lot of things. I know you talk about avoiding burnout by doing other things aside from just medicine, maybe even starting early so you're not forced to do it because of health. Why do you do what you're still doing? You could ride out in the sunset, drink margaritas on a beach or something. Why do you do what you do?
So there's a story that I always tell when I was a resident. This guy wasn't my patient, but I saw him literally across the room. And the room those days was curtained off cubicles, as many of you remember. And he had this look on his face, and he was dying, and he knew it that day. He was on hospice. He was going to die in the emergency department, or maybe we could get him upstairs, but he was dying. And he had this look on his face I just called it was just this profoundly sad, distraught look. And I called it the if only look. And I thought, maybe he wasn't doing this at all, but I think he was. I think he was replaying his life and thinking of all the missed opportunities, all things he wished he'd done and didn't do, all things he didn't say and wish he had. And I thought to myself at the time, and this was when I was like 29 or 28, and I was like, I will be damned if I have that look on my face on my deathbed. And I saw this quote actually pretty recently after that and said, the definition of hell is on your deathbed, you'll meet the person you could have become. And that scared the crap out of me, because I don't want to meet that person because I probably won't like him, but I don't want to meet that person. I want to be that person. And so for me, this life has just been, it's a one-shot event. I believe in reincarnation, but generally speaking, it's a one-shot event. And you better give it all you have, because you don't want to have that if only look on your face on your deathbed. I think that would be a life not well lived if that happens to you.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great realization. I think maybe we have one commonality. It was a Steve Jobs commencement speech at Stanford University years ago, very popular, TED Talks, YouTube, very similar thing. You don't want to go to your deathbed thinking I could have, should have, would have. John, we're running out of time. I promise you try to keep it with the audience at, a little bit under half an hour. And I could talk offline with you for hours, and I'm honored to have you here today. And I wish we meet each other here in our town, since we're both local. I encourage our audience to read your book, Entrepreneur RX. I thought it was well written, really spot on, and it's just a few years old, especially if they're interested in business or not. It's inspiring and helps anyone avoid repeating mistakes that you alluded to. Is there any last-minute advice or comments you'd like to provide to our audience?
Yeah, I say this. First off, I mentor a lot of kids trying to get to medical school. One of my common sayings is, I wouldn't be getting into medical school these days. The folks who are going in now, people are residents, medical students, crushed it. I mean, as competitive as it is, they are the cream of the crop, smartest young men and women that I've seen. And so let me say this: if I can do it to some measure, then anybody can do it, and certainly you can do it, because you have far better tools than I had, and you have the opportunity to learn from everybody else's mistakes. Called stand on the shoulders of giants. If you look at it with that perspective, go for it. The world really is open to opportunities.
Excellent advice. Thank you, John. Thank you again for attending. Appreciate your time today.
Pleasure.